Good morning, everyone. I would start today's event with a beautiful shaloka, and it reads Yatha Chitam Tatha Vacho, Yatha Vachas Tatha Kriya. As in the mind is the speech, as in the mind, so is the speech, as in the speech, so is the action. This is perhaps the most beautiful verse illustrating the thought of Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose, and I quote, one individual may die for an idea, but the idea will, after his death, incarnate itself into 1,000 lives. This thought of Netaji and his charisma lives beyond his life in such a way that generation of Indians believed and still believe that he lived on or still alive. The idea of Netaji, which had ignited the quest of India's freedom struggle among the youth, is the premise of organizing today's webinar. As we all know, Netaji was a true patriot who carried on struggle for freedom with great courage and devotion. The notable works of Netaji still inspires millions of Indian youth to do something for their country. With his honesty and determination for the cause, he had inspired many young girls to be in forefront of independence movement. Netaji remains one of India's most revered icon, with every political organization trying to live up to his glory. Yet it is often felt that he is neglected by the academic history and the popular public debate in this country. Government of India has envisioned and kick-started Bharat Ka Amrut Mahotsav India at 75 on 12th March 2021 with a similar intent to celebrate and bring forth the lives and the ideas of unsung and forgotten heroes of Indian freedom struggle. The Mahotsav is being celebrated throughout the country as a part of 75th year celebration of nation's independence. Our college, in continuation to the same, PGGCG 42 Sector 42, will also be celebrating it for next 75 weeks through a plethora of activities. With these words, I welcome you all to this national webinar to celebrate Bharat Ka Amrit Mahotsav with the theme Remembering Subhash Chandra Bose and His Quest for Freedom. Now I welcome Professor Nisha Agarwalji, Principal PGGCG 42. Professor Nisha Agarwal, the former Principal of Government College for Commerce and Business Administration, Chandigarh needs no introduction. She has an excellent experience of about 35 years and has an ability to train teachers to do their best. With excellent communication and interpersonal skills, ma'am is an expert in preparing college curriculum and managing student relations. Professor Agarwal co-authored a number of books on subjects like financial market, institutions, and financial services, etc. She has published many research papers in referee journals and presented papers in many various national and international conferences. Now, without taking much time, I request Principal Ma'am to formally welcome our speaker, Professor Pampa Mukherjee, and the participants. Over to you, ma'am.
Principal ma'am, please unmute yourself. आप बोलो, add कर दो। Principal ma'am, please unmute.
Yes. Okay. I welcome you all to this national webinar on remembering Subhash Chandra Bose and his quest for freedom to celebrate Azadi Ka Amrut Mahotsav India at 75. Azadi Ka Amrut Mahotsav is a series of events that have been organized by the Government of India to commemorate the 75th anniversary of India's independence. Honorable Prime Minister Shri Narendra Modi inaugurated the curtain raiser activities of Azadi Ka Amrut Mahotsav on 12th March 2021. It was on 12th March only in the year 1930 when Gandhiji began the Dandi March from Sabarmati Ashram against the salt laws along with 81 Padyatris. Azadi Ka Amrut Mahotsav is a tribute by us, the citizens of India, to all our freedom fighters and freedom movement. During the celebrations, the country will not only remember all the important milestones, important times during the freedom movement, but also gain new energy for development of our future. State and union territories governments are also organizing events all over India to mark the Mahotsav. Postgraduate Government College for Girls Sector 42, Chandigarh is also organizing series of events to participate in Mahotsav, and this webinar is part of it. The webinar is curated to pay homage to great freedom fighter Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose. The topic of the webinar was carefully chosen as from 23rd January 2021, the year-long celebrations to commemorate 125th birth anniversary of Netaji has been launched. I'm sorry. Uh, Today we have with us Professor Pema Mukherjee from Department of Political Science, Punjab University, Chandigarh, to talk about Netaji. Netaji is one of our most beloved national heroes who made an extraordinary contribution to India's freedom struggle. India's independence was Netaji's first priority. He was a warrior who had to wage the freedom struggle. Not only did he embrace the freedom movement wholeheartedly, but also became an inspiration for freedom. With the slogan, तुम मुझे खून दो, मैं तुम्हें आजादी दूंगा, he started preparing to awaken the country. Such was the charisma of his philosophy and personality that whoever listened to him was attracted to him. His popularity skyrocketed and he became Netaji to the general public. Let's remember the boundless courage and sacrifice of Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose. My best wishes are with the event coordinator and his team. I'm sure from today's event, we all will definitely take some learnings home. I request all the participants to be attentive throughout the session and use all the learnings from today's session in their lives. Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am. I now request Professor Sudhir Hindwan, coordinator of Bharat Ka Amrit Mahotsav in our college, to formally introduce our speaker, Professor Pampa Mukherjee. Over to you, sir.
It is truly an honor and matter of privilege for PGGCG 42 to host this national webinar on remembering Subhash Chandra Bose and his quest for freedom. I have no doubt that this webinar will be a worthwhile experience. All of us are here and have got a tremendous opportunity to learn from one of the best experts in this field, and I'm sure all of us will be benefited from this exquisite academic discourse. The webinar should not be seen as a ritual, but as a beginning of the next leap forward. My heartiest greetings to all of you, to all the listeners. We are also grateful to Professor Pampa Mukherjee, a professor in the Department of Political Science in the University of Punjab, for her gracing the occasions and agreeing to deliver a keynote speech despite her being extremely busy. How to talk about her when I want to paint her image in an endless sky that can shine with thousands of stars. It can become a picture for every eyes and mind to capture. Such a great personality she is. Appears to be a kind of a resident fellow with us because whenever we needed her, she was there offering her services. She is also the chief editor of the Journal of Social Sciences, Social Science Research in the Punjab University, and honorary director to the Center of Midwest and Central Asian Studies in Punjab University from 2019 onwards. She has also been the Deputy Coordinator of UGC and CAS First Department of Political Science, Punjab University from March 2000 onwards. She is also the chairperson of the Department of Political Science from 2014 to 2017, and she is also the chairperson of Regional Center for Advisory Committee uh, in 2016, which still goes on. Her areas of specialization include the development, the politics, public policies, environmental politics, decentralizing governance, sustainability, and sustainable development, qualitative research, and methodology. She's passed out from one of the best institutions of the country. Her schooling was done from Mother International, I think one of the very famous school of Delhi. And then thereafter, Lady Sri Ram College, one of the leading colleges of India. Delhi University, Jawaharlal Nehru. She has done her MPhil and PhD from Jawaharlal Nehru University, New Delhi. A National Merit Scholarship holder of MHRD during 1987 and 88, Dr. Mukherjee has been teaching and doing research for over 25 years and has a long, distinguished academic career. She has been visiting fellow UGC SAP to the North Bengal University Department of Political Science 2020. Sorry, I got to read it out because I cannot remember so many achievements. Uh, of course, because sometimes I feel that there are very few scholars who've got such a semantic views on certain areas. Visiting fellow in the University of Calcutta, 2027 March 2019, and filled ICCR chairperson for 2019 MEA Government of India 2018-21, visiting faculty of Amrita University Coimbatore, and of course visiting faculty in the Department of Political Science where she passed out from Center for Political Studies, Jawaharlal Nehru University, where she completed her MPhil and PhD. She has numerous publications to her credit, countless publications, I think there's too many. And I'm reminded of her Oxford University publication at the moment, the book Facing Globality, The Politics of Resistance, Relocation. The book was titled, and it was co-edited by her in Routledge Publications. She has got another publication on Uttarakhand, the politics, security, and development, and I can go on and on citing more of her achievement. It is my great pleasure to welcome her. Uh, of course, she has also been the reviewer of Asian Ethnicity, International Journal Routledge UK, reviewer of Science Direct USA, reviewer of International Journal for Legal Pluralism and Taylor and Francis UK. She has been in the committees of a number of academic institutions, and she's also made extensive visits to Canada, UK, Sweden, Nepal, Bhutan, Thailand, South Africa, Indonesia. I think I'll be short of words to explain her achievements. So we are running short of time. Due to the paucity of time, I'm going to say that may you all have a very good deliberations, worthwhile experience. As Principal Ma'am has already explained to you why this webinar is being done, which has been launched or hosted by our college, and may you get enriched with the understanding of the issue in much better perspectives. As Prime Minister of India has already said that this is going to be a kind of value attached to it. It's got a self-reliance, it's got a labor, it's got a loyalty, it's got truth, equality, and honesty. And similarly, we have got a 5 pillars of the guiding forces which are going to guide us further in the future. There's got a freedom, struggle at rate 75, ideas at the rate 75, achievements at 75, resolve at 75, and of course the most important of them is action at the rate 75. And that's why precisely we have chosen Subhash Chandra Bose as the symbol of our freedom fighters, I think, enumerating the ideas and taking us back to the golden hinges of our historical backgrounds, wherein, of course, I'm running short of. Anyways, may all of you have very good deliberations and learn from the best expert in this area. Thank you very much. Now I'm handing it over to Professor Mukherjee for the deliberation. Thank you.
Uh, a very good morning to all of you. I'm absolutely beholden that I have been invited by the college, Government College 42, to be a part of this great celebration, Bharat Amrit Mahotsav. I feel honored actually to be a part of all of you in this today's morning and deliberating on such occasions. Before I move on, I would like to first of all thank Madam Principal Professor Nisha Agarwal and members of the organizing committee, Professor Poonam Agarwal, Professor Sudhir Hindwan, Dr. Priti Sharda, and Mr. Mohit Sharma. Thank you, all of you, for organizing such a wonderful initiative. It is indeed a pleasure, and should congratulate the college for taking the lead and or in the region, taking a lead in the city for organizing a series of lectures in the coming I think days, and. Uh, and I've been told that I'm one of the first speakers in the series, and that itself is a great pleasure and honor for me personally. Now, with these words, I would like to today concentrate on one of the son of the soil as far as the region that I come from, Bengal. Being a Bengali scholar coming from Bengal, now it's an actually a moment of pride, not only as a citizen of India but also as a person from the region, from belonging the same cultural nationalism. Now, any talk about I would with this I would like to share my PPT and share some of my reflections on the subject. Kindly let me know when you say it. Can you all see it? Can you see it? Hello? Hello?
Ma'am, yes,
Can
ma'am.
you,
We are just waiting for it. Yes, ma'am.
can you
Ma'am,
see it? Can you see it?
presentation. Ma'am,
Please
kindly
share
share
it
the
again, ma'am.
presentation.
Okay, I'll share it again then. Okay, share screen. Can,
फिर आप दोबारा सर को दोबारा चेकिंग करना
can you see? Can you see now?
and please share your screen again.
I have done that.
Ma'am, I can't, it's not shared.
Okay.
Just go to the same screen and just share.
Just a second. Can you see now? Can you see?
Yeah, ma'am, now I can see.
Yeah. Okay.
Perfectly fine, ma'am.
Okay. Thank you
Over to
so
you.
much. And thank you so much. Now, as I have, as you all know, I have titled my presentation today as Remembering Subhash Chandra Bose and His Quest for Freedom. Now, I would like to argue that any discussion about India's fight for freedom cannot be complete without one of the most prominent and important figures of the time, fondly termed as or fondly called Subhash Chandra Bose, has been one of the ardent patriot of India. Now, while we celebrate 75 years of India's independence this year, we should also keep in mind that January 23rd, 2021 also marks the 125th birth anniversary of the brave freedom fighter and leader. Give me blood and I'll give you freedom. Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose's words are deeply etched in the minds of millions of Indians. A great political thinker and a radical nationalist, Netaji played a very active and prominent role in India's political life. He excelled both as a leader and fighter on account of his influential talks and speeches. We are all aware of that. His style was aggressive. The youth were particularly motivated by his active and upfront leadership, and thousands followed him. Strongly influenced by Swami Vivekananda's teaching, and he believed that Bhagavad Gita was a great source of inspiration for the struggle against the British. In fact, Swami Vivekananda's teaching on universal brotherhood, his nationalist thought, and his emphasis on social service and reform have had instilled a vision in him. Netaji successfully united Hindus, the Muslims, Sikhs, and Christians in the struggle for freedom based on his commitment to equal rights and respect for all, as well as his enlightened philosophy of cultural intimacy among India's diverse communities. He won the implicit trust of the minorities as no one else had. Now, as we celebrate today, this celebration is also a remembrance. Celebration is also of reflecting and going back into his words, his works, his life, his values that still has relevance in contemporary India. Now, that brings us to the question, as a political scientist, as a social scientist, as an academic, we tend to ask ourselves that why should we remember Netaji with renewed salience? Means the very question like this has embedded in it that there is a kind of relevance of Netaji even today, even in today's world, in today's contemporary India, as we strive towards development, growth, and to a new vision. Now, as I have mentioned, and my speakers before me has also mentioned that he one of the greatest freedom fighters of India. He was a charismatic leader. His leadership knew no bounds, and he was a great patriot. A participant of the non-cooperation movement and a leader of Indian National Congress, he was part of the more militant wing and known for his advocacy of socialist policies. He gave us a rich inheritance of ideas, ideals, and dreams. His generous and imaginative approach towards achieving unity by respecting difference. And this is where he was talking about universal brotherhood. He was talking about, transcending boundaries, not only territorial boundaries, but boundaries which are being divided by gender, class, caste, and religion. His international outlook is reflected in his thoughts, in his ideas, his action, and in his strategies. And in fact, Mr. Mohit had already mentioned that about one of his greatest quote was, "One individual may die for an idea, but that idea will, after his death, incarnate itself in 1,000 lives." It is of these ideas and ideals that Netaji uphold that we need to reflect and we need to study, need to revisit, need to, with some kind of, with vigor, with the dedication, with commitment. And I quote, such was his quest for freedom, such was his dedication and commitment to gain freedom, not by divisive policies but by uniting the communities, that even Mahatma Gandhi, that he was just before his death, he mentioned that Subhash knew no provincialism nor communal differences, and had in his brave army men and women drawn from all over India without distinction, and evoked affection and loyalty, which very few have been able to evoke. Now, much has been talked about Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose, and most of the writings on the subject basically tend to concentrate on the kind of controversies or the differences that existed between Gandhi and Nehru and Subhashji. Now, the idea is not to tease out the differences. In a democratic space, there may be differences. The idea is how different ideas, different perceptions were assimilated. We have to keep in mind that freedom struggle in India was also freedom through phases. There were different ideas and ideologies which were incorporated into a seamless web towards India's freedom. So while they were moderates, there were also extremists, and there were different groups, with a different set of ideologies. And it was not the question of either or, this versus that, but also assimilating different ideas, different perceptions, different views, and different efforts and struggles into one single dedication towards India's freedom. Now, Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose, like any other personality or any other thinker or any other great leader, was a product of his time. It will be a half-hearted exercise that if we do not talk about the life and the early life of Subhash Chandra Bose, or we do not talk about his past, because the influence of his past had a great imprint on the way the man he was. And his life was a story of struggle. It was a story of struggle, not only in his when he was in the Indian National Congress, or when he was talking about, when he set up in the Indian National Army, but from the very beginning. And his nationalist zeal and his nationalist fervor was reflected from his early college life. Subhash Chandra Bose was born to Prabhavati Devi and father Janki Nath Bose in Odisha in 1897. His father himself was bar at law, and he was quite an influential zamindar of the time. He took admission in the Protestant European school, which was run by the Baptist Mission. He did his BA, baccalaureate in philosophy from the famous Presidency College in Calcutta. However, uh, uh, he was expelled in 1916 for his nationalist activities. Now, this is the point I was trying to make, that his influence from his father, from his brother, he was into this national. He was a product of his time, in the sense that he was influenced by the larger nationalist environment that was going on. He was expelled therefore in 1916 for his nationalist activities, and he left India in 1919 to attend Cambridge University. And his parents actually sent him to Cambridge University to prepare for Indian civil services. In 1920, even though it's not mentioned in the PPT, it is for your information that in 1920, he passed the civil service examination. But in April 1921, after hearing of the nationalist turmoils in India, he resigned his candidacy and hurried back to India. Throughout his career, especially in its early stages, he was supported financially and emotionally by his elder brother Sharat Chandra Bose. He was a wealthy Calcutta lawyer, and he was also a member. Sharat Chandra Bose was also a member of Indian National Congress, also known as the Congress Party. In that time, he was a politician of INC. He was deeply associated with INC. So, after graduation, Bose returned to India, and he was determined, therefore, to avoid working in the service of the British Raj. Subhash Chandra Bose soon became the leader of the All India Youth Congress, and because of his vocal support for the independence movement, he was arrested by the authorities and exiled for 2 years to Mandalay in Burma. Now, very interestingly, Subhash Chandra Bose was a part of a huge family. He was one of the, there were 14 siblings, and he was one of the of the 14 siblings. He was one of them. Okay. Now, this is Subhash Chandra Bose. Okay, and you can see here, this is Subhash Chandra Bose, and his brother, actually Sharat Chandra Bose, was equally famous and equally well known. His father Janki Nath Bose was again a very nationalist and a very dominant, very affluent lawyer of his time. Okay, so images are very important to revisit, know Subhash Chandra Bose. Very little of his life is also known, and the reason being that, had he been alive today, or maybe a longer period of time, many of his files one could have accessed, and could have been written on him. So these photographs become very important to show that, that he came from a very erudite, very wealthy, educated, influential family from Odisha, but they were Bengali otherwise, but settled in Odisha. Now, Subhash Chandra Bose, upon his release, he joined the Indian National Congress, and he worked closely with Nehru on devising and promoting peaceful civil disobedience campaigns. And here I would like to mention that Subhash Chandra Bose was originally a supporter of Gandhi's non-violent approach. Okay, and in fact, he joined the non-cooperation movement started by Gandhiji, who made the Indian National Congress a powerful non-violent organization. Bose was advised by Gandhi to work under Chittaranjan Das, a politician in Bengal. There, Bose became a youth educator, a journalist, a commandant of the Bengal Congress volunteers. Okay, so and his activities, however, led to his imprisonment in December 1921. Now, with Nehru's encouragement during the mid 1930s, what you find, uh, uh, Bose became, Bose traveled to Europe. Okay, and because before that, as I just mentioned, that when civil disobedience movement started in 1930, Bose was already in detention for his associations with an underground revolutionary group, the Bengal Volunteers. Nevertheless, he was elected the mayor of Calcutta while in prison. Okay, and then thereafter he was released, then rearrested several times for his suspected role in violent acts. So because of all these developments, Nehru actually encouraged Bose during the mid 1930s to travel to Europe. Okay, and also to meet leading intellectuals and politicians, and in fact he also met Italian dictator Benito Mussolini. uh, Now, when he was allowed to proceed to Europe, he was, because of his ill health, in the forced exile, he wrote this famous book which is called The Indian Struggle. It was published in from 19 his writing from 1920 to 1934. In India's Struggle, the book that he wrote, which you can actually download if you want to, he pleaded India's cause with European leaders. So and this is the time when he met different European leaders from Germany, from Italy, and even in different parts of South and Southeast Asia particularly. Now, while in Europe, Subhash Chandra Bose became captivated by the vigor and apparent success of both fascism and communism. He was actually impressed by the new ideologies that even many moderates in the Congress thought might consign liberal democracy to the dustbin of history. Okay, but he was actually influenced by the discipline, by the organizational abilities of fascist Germany at that time. He was impressed by the organizational strength. Okay, he was influenced by the organizational strength of both fascism and socialism. Now, Netaji finally returned to India in 1936. And basically, his idea then was to, was to convince that only forceful action by Indians and their leaders would bring about Indian independence. And he believed that no real change in the history has ever been achieved by discussion. This is one important quote by Netaji, where he mentioned, when we said that, for only merely discussion cannot bring about any substantive difference, and something, freedom is to be snatched. Okay, freedom has to be snatched from the imperial force. Okay, you cannot plead for freedom, but you have to snatch freedom. Was his main contention. This was his main take on the whole thing. So what you find that he returned from Europe in 1936. Okay, as I just mentioned, but he was again taken into custody and was released after a year. Now, when I mentioned, like I gave the subheading that Netaji's life was a life of struggle. In fact, from 1921 to 1941, he was arrested 11 times. Okay, he was behind bars at least 11 times. So his entire phase was a phase of struggle, of turmoil, of extreme commitment, of dedication. Now, however, as I told you, he was not only a very intelligent man, educated. Look at his entire trajectory from passing out from Presidency College, along with his revolutionary activities. He goes on to clear the civil services, decline civil services. He was a great orator. He was also a kind of a journalist. He used to basically he had a number of conferences, seminars, of a time which was which was unprecedented. So in 1938, his obvious passion for freedom or for independence helped him elected as president of the Congress, and this in the Tripuri Congress in Haripura. It is also called the Haripura Congress. Now, in his entire, despite differences, he was part of the as I just mentioned you, that Bose was a part of non-cooperation movement. And in fact, he organized many campaigns based on Gandhi's idea of non-violence and non-cooperation. But he felt that a stage has come while Gandhiji laid the foundation created the environment of India's freedom struggle through his non-violent, non-cooperation movement. Now is a time to move on to the another stage in terms of strategy. So that's the shift that you find that took place with the Netaji coming very prominently and actively in India's freedom struggle. Now he wanted to move the Congress and independence movement in a direction which was radically different from Gandhiji's vision. He later, however, because of differences in opinion in terms of strategy and in terms of ideas, and that can happen, and that differences are very significant. According to me, differences are significant, but at the same time, even though they had differences, they had respect for each other. That's what was most important and more significant for us to take away as we celebrate the life and work of Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose. Now, as we all know, that he later resigned, and he created within the Congress his own internal faction of like-minded leftists and radicals, which he dubbed the All India, and he basically All India Forward Bloc. Okay, and he created this his own. He outfit that is called the All India Forward Bloc in May 1939. Therefore, why this was important? It was important because here he was basically proposing an alternate leadership, an alternative idea, an alternative framework for India's freedom. There may have been differences within the Congress in terms of strategy, in terms of idea of how to gain freedom, but in terms of leadership, there was no confusion that he was basically a very strong, dominant leader, and the core of his leadership was to gain India's freedom. And so what you find that May 39 also becomes 1939 also becomes very important because World War II broke out in September 1939, and British India took the position of a pro-war state. Now he also brought out a paper which was called Forward Bloc. Okay, he brought out a paper which was named as Forward Bloc. Now through his paper, look at his strategy. It is not only direct confrontation. The kind of different medium. Just think of the time. 1939 industrialization takes play has already had set in. Printing press comes in. And as we all know, the printing press had a huge role to play in terms of dissemination of information. Now, what you find that he's not merely talking in terms of action. He's also talking in terms of ideas. Now, through his paper, which was called the Forward Bloc, Subhash Chandra Bose gained popularity, and within the next few months, he was seen touring India, gathering a large following. More than a year had passed, and Subhash Chandra Bose's campaign obtained national significance with the first All India Conference in Nagpur. A resolution titled All Power to Indian People, urging militant action for struggle against colonial rule, was passed, and Subhash Chandra Bose was elected as party president, and a mass movement against the employment of Indian resources and men for the cause of World War II was established. Okay, so So what you find that 1939, 1940, these are the important years in the sense that where you find a kind of a shift taking place, where Subhash Chandra Bose leaves the Congress, INC, Indian National Congress. He basically creates a a kind of a group of radical and a like-minded leftist people. He creates an alternative All India Forward Bloc. He brings out his newspaper Forward Bloc. He starts gathering mass mobilization. This is where the mass mobilization of Subhash Chandra Bose comes out. So he traverses length and breadth of the country, and what is more important, he starts questioning as to why, as to Indian resources, and why should Indian men should be basically become guinea pigs of World War II. Okay, so what you find that so within the Congress, he emerged as an independent entity. He emerged as he left Congress therefore because of that, and creates his independent political party that advocated militant action against the British authorities in India. So as a student of political history, you find the kind of shift that takes place during this period, and the shift was initiated by Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose from from one kind of strategy of negotiation, of bargaining, of creating a space of in terms of of non-violence, of non-cooperation, to a kind of combining it, rather I would say, rather than it is neither, as I told you, it is a question of neither this versus this, but also combining it with a kind of direct offensive. It is a offensive and defensive, as we can take it. Okay, so advocated militant action against the British authorities in India. Now so what you find that Subhash Chandra Bose called on Netaji, and what is important in his strategy was the manner in which Subhash Chandra Bose used the transnational space. And for the next few minutes, I think one should deliberate on how he used this space, this that is going beyond borders, beyond boundaries, both in terms of ideas as well as in terms of positioning oneself, brought about pressure of for the British from not only from inside but also from outside. Now, Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose called on Indians to take advantage of Britain's precarious position, as by this time, World War II was on, and German warplanes were pounding, basically attacking London, and German armies overran France. Now, by this time, Bose was rated by British intelligence services as India's third most popular leader after Gandhiji and Nehru, especially among students and other young Indians who simply called Subhash Chandra Bose as Netaji, that meaning revered leader. Now, British authorities were thus quickly arrested Bose and put him under house arrest. And just like Bhagat Singh 20 years earlier, Bose managed to escape and elude the British authorities using a variety of disguises and fake documents. In fact, he was under the guise of the name that he had taken under when he was under disguise was Senor Orlando Mazzotta. Okay, and he had an Italian passport, and with that Italian passport, Subhash Chandra Bose made it to Berlin, and from there on he started his exile come revolution in the transnational space. Moreover, with the arrival of Subhash Chandra Bose, as the leader of Germany, once again that emerged as a platform for Indian revolutionary activities with the newer means and strategies. And we'll see what kind of strategies that he is talking about. Now, he made his way through Afghanistan. As I told you again, his life was life of struggle. It was his quest was actually a struggle for freedom. He made his way through various mountainous areas, particularly through Afghanistan to Soviet Union, where he hoped to convince Stalin to support his anti-British activities. Stalin, who at this point was still on good terms with Hitler, sent Netaji to Berlin, where his fervent anti-British views won him an audience with Hitler's foreign minister, Joachim von Ribbentrop. Now, Ribbentrop agreed to allow Bose to transform a few thousand Indian prisoners of wars who, while fighting for the British in North Africa, were captured by the Germans into loyal groups of Germans' army, the Wehrmacht. So what you find that uh, however, when in June 1941, Hitler turned against Stalin. Okay, so there was a kind of tensions between these two leaders, and invaded the Soviet Union. And with this, Bose became extremely disillusioned with, and it was distrustful of the Nazis. It was during this a period that you find that he was asked to allow. I mean, he requested the German leaders to allow him to travel to Japan. Now, Japan was, as we all know, was long admired by the Indian nationalists ever since Japan had emerged as a strong, independent, Western country because of Japan's surprising victory over Russia in the Russo-Japanese War in 1904 to 1905. So he from there, in Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose tried to flee to Japan. Therefore, what you find, no, see, why are we talking about all this? Because without talking about all this, about his lives, of the details that we are talking about, how do we read Subhash Chandra Bose? How do we make sense of his revolutionary ideas? Okay, this becomes then important to reflect on these are important historical markers. Okay, and it is through these markers that we can get to know Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose. So in November 19, look at his effort at a time when today it is so easy with our internets and other things. He was operating at a time when there were no other means of communication. It was through letters. It was through the kind of devices that he talked about. He held so many conferences. He brought out this paper called the Forward Block, and he's talking in terms of communication. See, now by November 1949, Subhash Chandra Bose established the Free India Center. Okay, and he also and the Azad Hind Radio, also known as the Free India Radio in Berlin. So this was a look at his strategy to read in between the line. So what he's talking, one is a face-to-face talk that he did while in India. So then he does what second kind of strategy? No, one is mass mobilization in terms of strategy. Second comes in terms of print communication as a strategy in terms of dissemination of ideas through his paper, the Forward Blog. Third comes in terms of, see, here comes another set of technology, uses in the kind of invention which industrial revolution brings about, uses that in his favor to reach out to people, to talk to people. So he uses Azad Hind Radio, also known as the Free India Radio in Berlin. So the memorandum, this is very informative for all of us, that he was called Netaji because as a part of this, the memorandum of Free India Center laid down 4 regulations. Jai Hind would be the salutation to greet one another, and as we all know that it is still there. Partly in armed forces, in all official functions, we even in unfurling the flag we say Jai Hind. It's not that we have that Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose was totally relegated to the background. He lives through our lives. He lives through in the way we have integrated him in our political life. Okay, in our cultural life. So Jai Hind, as we all know, comes from where? Jai Hind was one of the regulations which was set up by the Free India Center. So Jai Hind would be the salutation to greet one another. The patriotic song Jana Gana Mana would be the national anthem of Azad Hind, okay, of Free India. And Hindustani or Hindi would be the official language of Azad Hind. Henceforth, therefore, and it was decided in this platform, that's in this center, that Subhash Chandra Bose would be referred to as Netaji. So these are four important regulations that, what we find became very interesting at that time. It became very important and significant. Okay. So, and as I was talking about, the radio, and it's very famous, if you go to the Bengali version of the thing, because he spoke also in Hindi, English, and Bengali, apart from other languages. So it is very famous, Ami Subhash Bolchi. Okay, so in the broadcast on Azad Hind Radio from Germany, he made a stunning revelation that shocked everyone, including the British. Okay, this is Subhash Chandra Bose speaking. Ami Subhash, Bolchi. This is the translation. Speaking over to you over the Azad Hind Radio. Now the hour has struck. I come forward to speak. Now these are the things that he was cut above the rest. His thinking was out of the box, far ahead and different. Okay, he was very different from the rest of his time. He thought that freedom cannot only be taken or will only be achieved by working within the domain of the within the domestic terrain. He basically, this entire strategization was international in its connotation, in the sense there has to be a pressure built from outside, and hence he sought that the support of Germany, Italy, and Japan. Okay, so so one of the another quotes from Ami again, I Subhash Chandra Bose, the first talk that he gave over the Azad Hind Radio, and where he says that I solemnly declare on behalf of all freedom loving Indians in India and abroad that we shall continue to fight imperialism till India is once again the mistress of our own destiny. During the struggle and in the reconstruction that will follow, we shall heartily cooperate with all those who will help us in overthrowing the common enemy. And here, obviously, the common enemy is the colonial rule. I am confident that in the sacred struggle of the vast majority of Indian people will be with us. So even though he's outside, he's reaching out to the teeming million in India through Azad Hind Radio. Now, this is something, he was a master strategist. He was a charismatic leader, not only through his fiery speeches, but look at the kind of strategization that he did at a time when there were, technology was just coming out, a product of the Industrial Revolution. Okay. So these are important facets as we read Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose through his speeches. Unfortunately, what has happened is that as far as Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose is concerned, that we we do not have read or may have gone into detail his writings, even his poems, he believed in what you call cultural nationalism. He believed in cultural intimacy, as I just mentioned. Okay, what we need to therefore do is to go through his works, revisit his works more in greater detail. And try to infer when we are talking about Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose, we need to keep in mind that we need to contextualize Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose in his time. You cannot, because whatever he did, it is said that he made many political errors, but one has to see Netaji that he was doing all this thing with a certain purpose and goal to achieve freedom. Okay, so there are hitters and misses. The idea is what we take and what we leave. Okay, so these are the interesting facets. So what you find, therefore, that in early 1943, so as I mentioned, that from Berlin now he was disillusioned when when Russia was attacked by the Germans. He was disillusioned by the Nazis, and he therefore was interested in going to Southeast Asia. He was interested in going to Japan. So in early 1943, what you find, Bose traveled by submarine halfway around the world to the Imperial Japan. Okay, in Japan, Subhash Chandra Bose would encounter similar racist attitudes that reflected growing Japanese disdain for the Asian peoples, including Indians. In fact, why it is called that, like he wanted help from Japan, and there are also critics who said that this was kind of a political error, because Japan itself did not have a very good track record of what they are doing with its neighboring countries. It was not very exciting that way. So yet by this Japan, what you find, Japan's military was suffering critical reversals at the hands of the Americans, and some Japanese officials recognized that Netaji Bose could prove useful. So it was a kind of a win-win situation, where we find that Japan was also in a tight spot, and they wanted to also garner support, and Bose being could connect with the plantation workers out there. They thought that they could use Bose in that case. So hence they allowed Bose, as earlier in Germany, to create a unit within Japan's army, and this was composed of Indian soldiers who had been captured by Japan while fighting by the British. So this is because of this, because again a coercive policy was used by Japan, and hence the criticism was there. It's not that Bose did a blunder, because Japan itself was engaged into kind of torture and coercive activities. Now Bose's reputation and charisma with him won the loyalty of these Indian soldiers. Mostly they were, as I told you, they were plantation. What happened? Can you see me? Hello? Hello? Can you see me? Can you hear
Yes,
me?
ma'am, we can see you.
Yeah. So Bose's reputation and charisma helped him win the loyalty of these Indian soldiers, as well as many in the Indian expatriate communities of Southeast Asia. So, because there were thousands and thousands of workers who were working as an expatriate community in most of this region in Japan and other Southeast Asian countries, as in Indonesia, in Japan, in Mauritius and Malaysia, as an indentured labor, and Bose would connect with them and make organize themselves. Okay. So, can you see the PPT? Hello? So, you can see Subhash Chandra Bose. Hello? Can you see the PPT?
Yes, yes, ma'am. Yes, yes.
Yeah. This is Subhash Chandra Bose. Okay, and now he's in the front row here, and he is with the crewmen of the Japanese submarine 129 after he was transferred from German submarine U-180 in June 1943. No, it was, all these things were not easy. The amount of struggle, underwater travel from Berlin to Japan at a time, like the kind of coordination, the kind of coordination, as well as kind of leadership capabilities he had to display. He's there with his crewmen in this submarine. So these are interesting pictures. No, so all this plantation he was able to manage, and he managed to bring together all these plantation workers together, organize them. So these soldiers were organized into what came to be known as the Indian National Army, or what we know as Azadi Hind Fauj. Okay. Now, Bose boldly declared to his troops, Delhi chalo, on to Delhi. To basically, Delhi was the center of power, and they needed to be captured. And he offered Indian nationalists, again, it was in this context, a rousing new slogan: "Give me blood, and I'll give you freedom." Okay. So, and this is a classical picture of Azad Hind Force. Why this is important, we will talk later. You can see it is Rani Jhansi regiment actually. Okay, this is the Rani Jhansi regiment where you will see women a part of this Indian National Army. So so he was, so when we look at then therefore Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose, we find that he was not merely a person that who believed in militant heroism. He was also a shrewd diplomat who often tried to have coordination, who sought allies, friendship from various nations. And he also tried hard at making Germany and Japan powerful and useful friends of India that would be free from the British rule. So it was kind of what you called a part of distant nationalism. He so what you find that Bose says, and it is his quotation: "Success always stands on the pillar of failure." So Bose lived with this philosophy and also inspired others. Netaji encountered failure several times, but he converted those failures to triumph with his struggle. Whether it is municipal politics, the journey from a common congressman to the Congress president's position, the formation of the forward bloc, or the struggle of the Indian National Army, he passed every test with distinction. He passed every state with a feather in his cap. Okay, in fact, what you find that at the time of India's independence, Clement Attlee, if you recollect, was the British Prime Minister. Okay, so he came to Kolkata, that is Clement Attlee, in 1956. At that time, his host was the governor and former Calcutta High Court Chief Justice P.V. Chakravarti. And P.V. Chakravarti tried to find out from Attlee the reason behind the British decision to grant freedom to India. Now, in response, Attlee said that the loyalty of the Indian Army and Navy to the British state was declining due to the increasing military activities of Bose's Azad Hind Fauj. Now, this was one of the major reasons Clement Attlee mentioned. Now, this acknowledgement itself proves a great contribution of Bose's to India's independence. It finds a mention in a letter written to the publisher by Justice Chakravarti in the book A History of Bengal by the famous scholar R.C. Majumdar. Many of us as history students, we know about this. Even Gandhiji in 1946 admitted that Bose's patriotism was second to none. Okay, the alliance therefore forged by Subhash Chandra Bose was the result of cumulative effort of a large network of revolutionaries in the transnational space, along with the participation of diasporic Indians and supporters. Nevertheless, the history of the revolutionary movement that demanded India's independence beyond Indian boundaries is a subject, unfortunately, that has received scarce attention. So what you Okay, so what you therefore find that the Bose therefore had an explicit strategy. I am again underlining this, particularly for my young friends, that Bose had an explicit strategy to liberate India from British imperialism through international collaborations, and that strategic framework of action directly and indirectly accelerated the cause of freedom and national pride in India. Okay, now that in some what you find therefore if you put all these things together, what you find that key contribution of Netaji to India's freedom struggle was in terms of that he was talking about Purna Swaraj. He was an complete advocate of complete freedom. He was not in favor of dominion status, as we all know. His army, Azad Hind Fauj or INA, became the element in the fight for absolute liberty. Free India with no control or influence of the British was Bose's dream. He said that we will stand for the complete political and economic liberation of the Indian people, quote unquote. And this is from Indian Struggle, his work 1920 to 1934. So he basically was advocating Purna Swaraj, complete freedom. Okay, there's no compromise, but complete takeover. Second was, he was talking about in terms of, he was, as we had just discussed earlier, mass mobilization. He was a great speaker, he's a good orator, he could connect to people. And so Bose's ideology was so strong that it was able to attract thousands of young men and women towards his cause. He was of the opinion that any revolution would not be possible with the mobilization of the masses. Okay. And second, importantly, and I just mentioned here, and when I showed you the picture, the profile picture that we have taken from the archives, that he created the Ranchi inclusion of women. So while women freedom fighters were present all across different groups fighting for freedom, Subhash Chandra Bose put them at the forefront, not in not at the sidelines. Okay, he saw no difference between men and women when it came to its fight for freedom, and therefore made relentless campaigns in the 20s and the 30s to mobilize women to come to the front lines and succeed as well. So it's not that women were not there, but they were given the context of the time. Many of them, you must have also seen the picture Charulata. So if you have not, please do see, because again, this is something where the subject matter was how women behind closed doors from the domain would be engaged in freedom struggle. So, or if you have not seen, please do see Ghare Baire. So you'll understand that there were, because of the patriarchy, because of the time frame in which India was located, the women were, even though Bengali women still were were active, but not in the forefront. So even in Charulata or in Ghare Baire, you will say how silently they were associated, in their own discreet way, associated with freedom struggle. Or they supported their husbands or the households in the fight for freedom. So Subhash Chandra Bose thing is that from the four walls of the house, Subhash Chandra Bose made effort to put them in the center stage, in the front line. He called on, therefore, women to join the army once he returned to Asia. Okay, so women's regiment we find in 1943, and you'll find there were 1,000 soldiers, women soldiers, strongly named as Rani of Jhansi regiment. Okay, so it was a great that way contribution that he was talking about. No, and and third important thing that we find is that because of the manner in which he navigated in this transnational space, outside the boundaries, outside the borders, where traveling itself was so difficult, Netaji, because of his ideas, because of his strategy, gave a global identity. Okay, so Netaji is credited with giving global identity to the Indian leadership. Earlier, it was Swami Vivekananda who had enlightened the world about India's spiritual and cultural superiority and identity. Netaji's struggle for freedom, therefore, proved to be an inspiration not just for India, but also for all quote-unquote third world countries. The Indian freedom struggle and the war of independence led by Netaji, therefore, had a profound impact on those countries. Netaji's status establishes him as the hero of freedom, therefore, globally. So India, therefore, through the freedom struggle, through the strategies of Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose, gains a kind of a global space, and in the imagery of the globally, he, in India emerges as a champion of freedom, of equality, and justice. So so the alliance forged by, therefore, Subhash Chandra Bose was the result of a cumulative effort of a large network of revolutionaries in the transnational space. Okay, you also find participation of diasporic Indians and supporters. So therefore, what we find that Bose had an explicit strategy to liberate India from British imperialism through international collaborations and through strategic framework of action, directly and indirectly, which basically hastened the speed, which accelerated the cause of freedom and national pride in India. Okay, so Netaji and his allies, in fact, implemented the Lookist. Today we talk about the Lookist policy. We are talking about actist policy. I think in this is one takeaway from this lecture, that he had already, in fact, way back. If you just have a reflection back, that he's actually what he was doing by operating in South and South, particularly in the Southeast Asian countries. He was actually, looking at the East. That is the Lookist, and he was actually, even though today we use this in a different context, but look at this in terms of, metaphorically, he was actist policies a lifetime before the modern contemporary times. So, as I always mentioned, that Netaji was far ahead of his generation in that sense. Okay, he always had an out of box kind of a way of doing things. So, as far as, if you ask me, if to what extent Netaji's legacy is relevant in contemporary India, it is number one is the idea of united India, that is transform India into a united, prosperous, and egalitarian society. Okay, and second is women's equality. There are numerous. He had therefore had an enlightened view of the role of women in society. So these two things are very strong. Women's equality today we talk about, and there are many more. And one can, if you think in an idea of an united India. While we are talking, he talked about it going beyond caste, religion, and gender. He basically was thinking in terms of a one India, irrespective of all in the divisiveness that exists in Indian society. Okay, so. Therefore, what we find that that it is important for us to see is, why are we talking about? We are also talking about, when we talk about Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose, we are also talking about the revolutionary movement of India's freedom struggle, right? And it is important for us through Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose to see how the revolutionary movement of India's freedom struggle established contact with a base in the Far East. From sojourners to settlers, the Indians in the diaspora went through the process of migration and also were instrumental in creation of societies. They formed excellent networks, which not only facilitated in easing the hardship faced as new settlers, but also contributed to their original homelands in a profound way. Um, uh, Although what you find that there were various schemes to obtain freedom and drive the British out of India, failed on a larger platform, the people like Subhash Chandra Bose and other revolutionaries were able to create a considerable impact on the British by arousing a patriotic fervor, educating the host societies as well as members of the diaspora. Through patriotic songs, literatures, and lectures, Subhash Chandra Bose kept alive the spirit of revolution and enjoyed, which basically resulted in a sense of what may be termed as long distance nationalism. I repeat once more, what he was able to create, what you call long distance nationalism, which was like far ahead of his time. Now, I think I would also like you, if you this thing that I could, this is AIR archives, All India Radio archives. If you are interested, for a brief moment to listen to Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose's voice, okay, and where he speaks from Azad Hind Radio, the first one. Just listen to this for a moment.
बहनों और भाइयों, हमने जो आजादी की लड़ाई छेड़ रखी है, उसे तब तक जारी रखना होगा जब तक हमें मुकम्मल आजादी हासिल न हो। दलादली, बहस मुबाहस और विभिन्न मतभेदों को भुलाकर विभिन्न दिशाओं में बिखरी सारी ताकत जितना शीघ्र हम केंद्रित कर सकेंगे, उतना ही जल्द हम आजादी हासिल कर सकेंगे। हमारे सामने इस वक्त सबसे बड़ी समस्या संघ शासन विधान को हमेशा के लिए दफना देने की है। तभी हम अपने मन के मुताबिक अपना शासन विधान तैयार कर सकेंगे। वर्तमान शासन विधान तो हमारी मर्जी के खिलाफ साम्राज्यवाद को मजबूत कर हमारी गुलामी की जंजीरों को और मजबूत करने के लिए बनाया गया है। इसे आप हरगिज स्वीकार न करें। आप संगठित शक्ति से शांति और अहिंसा पूर्वक आत्म बलिदान करने के लिए जल्द से जल्द तैयार हो जाइए। न मालूम कब बिगुल बज उठे। इस वक्त जमाना हमारे अनुकूल है। वर्तमान अंतर्राष्ट्रीय परिस्थिति से हमें लाभ उठाना चाहिए। भारत को भी दुनिया के दूसरे राष्ट्रों के साथ ही जीना मरना है। इसलिए हमें अंतर्राष्ट्रीय परिस्थिति से पूरा वाकिफ रहने की दरकार है। अभी तो हम इच्छा रखते हुए भी हिंदुस्तान के बाहर उपनिवेशों में बसे हुए अपने भाइयों की मदद नहीं कर सकते। वे भी हमारे ही खून है। हम उन्हें भला कैसे भूल सकते हैं। भारत आज चिरकालीन शोषण के कारण दरिद्रता की चक्की में पीस रहा है। महामारी आदि बीमारियों का भारत घर हो रहा है। निरक्षरता अभी फैली हुई है। वैज्ञानिक साधन हमें मुयस्सर नहीं जिससे खेती की उन्नति कर सके। दो शाम रोटी मुहाल है। इन सब कुरोगों की एकमात्र
So the idea was to give you a glimpse of Netaji's, internationalism. His
बहनों
So, so this was his idea of internationalism, what we are talking about, and how he was trying to basically bring together the diasporic community under the banner of India's freedom struggle, and also exploiting the international situation to bring about a kind of a pressure on British on the British colonial rule. With this words, I would like to stop here and maybe reflect upon, and these are some of my reflections on Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose. And before I stop, and who does not know his famous, the Indian Army, the band also plays, which we know within 2 minutes. That's there. With this, I stop.
खुशी के गीत गाए जाए, जिंदगी है कौम की, कौम पे लुटाए जाए। खुशी के गीत गाए जाए, जिंदगी है कौम की, कौम पे लुटाए।
Jai Hind. Thank you.
Thank you, Pampa ma'am. And Bengal is always known as the land of knowledge. And not only the knowledge in the present context, but from the days of Advait Vedanta. The birth of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and the son of soils from Khudiram Bose, Chittaranjan Das, Rabindranath Tagore, Bangla Bandhu Mujibur Rahman, Ishwar Chandra Vidyasagar, Bankim Das Chatterjee, Ras Bihari Bose, and listening about them through a daughter of Bengal. I think today I am, totally drenched in the colors of Bengal, and all I can say that আপনি খুব ভালো বলেছেন, ধন্যবাদ. So this is I tried to say to ma'am that thank you for speaking so well about the son of soil, one of the most important hero of Indian freedom struggle, Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose. And thank you, ma'am, for such an enlightening session. With your permission, we would now like to take up the question posted in chat box, and otherwise from some of our participants, those who are listening, you sitting here in our different auditoriums and gymnasium hall. Uh, if you permit, ma'am.
Yes, please.
Yes.
Yes, yes.
So, yes, I think these question holds a relevance with the present, our presentation today. A lot of things have been said and told by you. The question I am clubbing all the questions and putting it in one so that it'll be easy for the speaker. Uh, Ma'am, our question is why there is a relative neglect to Netaji. Next question is why it is important to revisit, reread, and engage with Netaji's thought in contemporary times, and how to achieve that. And before you start answering this question, I would just put a disclaimer to it that whatever views ma'am will be sharing, it will be thoroughly in the social and academic context, and it will be viewed in that only. Over to you, ma'am.
Uh, Thank you, Mohit. I think you have asked a very, very relevant and a substantive question. Actually, both your questions are somewhere intertwined together. So I will take it all together. One is that why it is important and why there has been a relative neglect, okay, and why there is a need to revisit Subhash Chandra Bose in understanding contemporary India. I think all these three, important questions that you have mentioned are very significant, and thank you for raising it that way. You'll agree with me that India's struggle, the struggle for India's freedom, which now spans for more than, say, for example, 90 years so far, been studied from, and now this is from my academic take, number one, studied from varied perspectives, okay, from variety of perspective, I beg your pardon. What has happened, what if you wrote, see very objectively, that the historiography, okay, of the study of the Indian national movement, we all know that, a student of history, it basically falls under four major categories. We have the imperialist school of historians, which are popularly known as the Cambridge School, and it offers study from the perspective of the British Empire. You also have the Marxist school, the nationalist historiography, and you also have the subaltern school with Ranajit Guha and others. We know that. The subaltern school for the young student are basically, the history of ordinary people, the subalterns, okay, the history of ordinary people. Also the regional histories. Now they offer different perspectives from the Indian side. Now, if you look at the imperialist school, which was basically represented by the bureaucrats from, naturally did not include the revolutionary movement as part of the nationalist movement. Okay, and simply viewed them as a kind of a distinct category of quote unquote terrorists. Right now, say for example, for instance, in 1980, there was a sedition committee report, right? And Thomas Babington Macaulay report, it is also called the Macaulay report on education policy of 1883, falls under this category. Further, what you find that this nationalist school also adopted a holistic approach, an all-inclusive policy, and which mainly concentrates on the mainstream movement, with the formation of Indian National Congress in 1885 as the central theme. So basically it concentrates on INC and its role in Indian freedom struggle. So what happened in the process is the nationalist school's adoption of a kind of a skewed, narrow INC oriented viewpoint was exclusive of all those revolutionaries not holding membership of the INC, or those choosing different paths from INC, leaving them, kind of a diverse, kind of a comparative comparative neglect. Now, therefore, unfortunately, what you find that it's not that research on has not been done on revolutionary movement or on revolutionaries. So what you find that despite the fact that there has been an exhaustive research, it will be unfair to say that there has not been research. Despite the fact that there exists exhaustive research, um, what has happened that those revolutionaries who left the borders of India, who left the shores, okay, of British India, were confined within a narrow framework. Somewhere they were like, out from the collective memories of history writing. And in the process, what has happened, there was a tendency to view revolutionaries within an inward perspective, because most of the actions were going on within the domestic policy. Only people like, say, Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose, he is leaving the shore, going out, forming, a forward bloc, Azad Hind, everything, his action is outside, okay, mostly his action is outside. So what has happened in the writing of history, there was mostly an inward perspective, focusing on the domestic terrain rather than those who have left the borders. And so and therefore they were treated as individuals abroad, performing say activities which were aspired to have vibrations back home. That was the logic of Netaji's action. No, that they will do action outside, which will have its reaction inside, right? But in doing so, in the writing of history, somewhere they were relegated to the margin. Now, because of this inward perspective, they were treated as Indian revolutionaries abroad. Okay, Indian revolutionaries abroad. So what is needed now is that we need a larger framework, okay, which is inclusive of both internal as well as external, where we can incorporate this in not only the inward but this now more inclusive, which includes both internal as well as external activities, to understand the global range of India's freedom movement and the role of revolutionaries in its entirety. Okay, so we need, number one, so what are we talking? Number one, we are talking about that we need to reread Subhash Chandra Bose. Now, there is one problem though, in a very objective manner. Now, you all know there are many declassified files as well as Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose's life is concerned, because because it is said that while going to Tokyo, his flight was burned. So there are different narratives about his death. Basically, had he lived a little more, many things could have been documented. And so all these interpretations, because it's largely based on also many interpretations, and the way the history is written, basically we are questioning that. But on a more objective sense, what we need to do, we as academics, we as social scientists, we as citizens of India, we need to first of all is to go back to those archives. We need to reread whatever is there for us in terms of reading in between the lines, drawing from the pictures and from archives, from the whatever is documented, talking to people who have been part, say for example, his daughter died only in, I think, this year only, just before his 125th birth anniversary. So his granddaughter, I think. So you find his nieces is there. There are remote family members are there. There is a need to talk to them. They need to go back to the roots, maybe put things together. That's not how history writing is done. So my take is that we need to first of all read a little more on Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose. Read a little more on of his writings that is there. How many of us have read his book India Struggle, that he had written while in jail, to be very frank and to be very honest? We need to read that, what is there in it in totality. Maybe download that. These are very downloadable kind of a thing. Read them, reflect on it, discuss, debate. Idea is, like, we are always very scared of debates. Debates also gives us, it's not the question of controversy. We are not interested. While we are celebrating these great souls of India, great sons of India, great patriots of India, and then maybe, it's a huge, it was the Indian freedom struggle was the greatest mass movement the world has civilization has witnessed. We all know that Indian itna bada mass movement we have never seen. So it is bound. How do you expect that there will be no differences? How do you expect that there will not be any views? I think we should celebrate these different views. We should celebrate these differences. That despite that different this thing, they did not confront each other. It is not the question of confront. There were differences, but then together, even Gandhiji says that no one can question Subhash Chandra Bose patriotism, with whom he had the difference in terms of how to gain freedom. One was on soft on a non-violent mode. The other was in terms of you have to be out. The stage has come because he was basically talking about the stage. So he is also, and Subhash Chandra Bose also recognizes Gandhi's contribution by saying that he had created that stage where certain things have been placed. His socialist policies merges. He's talking you must have heard the clipping, right? He's talking about the poor. He's talking in terms of, like there has to be, like they have to be taken care of. So his socialist fervor is there. And along with this, he's talking in terms of recognizing that there is something called quote unquote cultural intimacy of the diverse diasporic communities. We need to basically, I think, there are many interpretations. There may be in many interpretations. We as academics, what we need to do very clearly is to read and revisit people and revisit the life and works of these great freedom fighters, and look at the sources that are available to us in a more constructive manner. If I have satisfactorily answered your query, Mohit, the questions that have been raised. Hello?
Thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you so much, ma'am.
My pleasure.
Actually, Mohit got disconnected, and just a second.
Is it okay, Moy?
Which means
What are you going to do? Madam?
Ma'am?
what to speak?
Ma'am?
Shall take.
Check. Yes. Thank you, Pampa ma'am. I'm sorry for this technical glitch. And when you are talking about this subaltern school of historiography, and a lot of history of that ordinary people were missing. I remember one of the incident when I visited some part of Madhya Pradesh and Ranchi and some part of Maharashtra under one of the project with Government of India. When I visited the local schools, a lot of teachers were saying me that the tribal contribution to Indian freedom struggle is
Mute,
not
just a second.
written.
Please mute. Rest of the you please mute because there is so much of sound.
So they have given me this idea of saying that yes.
Which
Please rest mute, please. And here. Yeah.
Yeah. Now is it audible, ma'am? Hello.
I can hear you. I can hear you.
So that's the way you have told us about the historiography and the different schools of historiography. One of the prominent school for the subaltern school for the ordinary people, that's you say. So one of at one point of time, almost like a 10, yeah. So almost like a decade ago, when I visited the different parts of Madhya Pradesh and Ranchi in one of my project with Government of India, and I visited different SCRTs, the state councils for education, research, and trainings. So a lot of tribal, teachers was coming from the tribal areas. They have also the similar problem like you have just discussed, which is very relevant to the contemporary times. That the Bhil's uprising was there in 1818 to 1831, much before then we have started with 1857 Mangal Pandey revolt, and 1831 to 1832 for the coal uprising. The coals were also the tribal people, and we hardly see their their contribution in our history books when we talk about the subaltern historiography. And whatever you have told us, whatever you have shared with us with regard to the, we need to reconnect, we need to re-engage and revisit the Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose, and also it is also the part of historiographers that they need to rewrite, or maybe we have to elaborate the work, thought, and contribution of Subhash Chandra Bose in the modern times. And I think the government of India's vision to start this Bharat Ka Amrut Mahotsav was of the same, is on the same lines. I thank you, ma'am. And now on this positive note, I request Dr. Preeti Sharda, the librarian of our college, Sector 42, to kindly present the vote of thanks. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, Mohit. Thank you so much. Good afternoon, everyone. I consider it a great privilege to present vote of thanks today. I, on behalf of the organizing committee of Postgraduate Government College for Girls, Sector 42, Chandigarh, would like to make this opportunity to thank you, our worthy speaker, Professor Pampa Mukherjee, who took out time from her busy schedule to give us valuable insight. Thank you, ma'am. I personally feel it was a great lecture and we all have many takeaways from the session today. I'm sure our participants must have benefited immensely from this enriching talk. A big thank you to our worthy principal, Professor Nisha Agarwal, for granting permission and her continuous motivation to make us strive towards excellence. A shout out to our ever so proactive Professor Poonam Agarwal, Dean of the College, for her constant guidance and support in helping out to put this webinar together. Heartfelt gratitude to our coordinator, Professor Sudhir Handwan, moderator, Mr. Mohit Verma, for their unflinching support and coordination. No webinar is complete if it had not been for our enthusiastic participants. Thank you one and all for your willingness and involvement in the webinar and making it a success. I once again would like to tell you all that feedback form link has been shared in your chat box. Please fill the form so that the certificate may be sent to you to your email. Please be careful while filling your name, designation, and the name of institute. Please provide us your email ID, a valid email ID, as the certificate will be sent to you via email only. Once again, a big thank you. Jai Hind, Jai Bharat. We are signing off now.